Hey, it's Brandi Kruse. You're watching a clip from our weekly show, Sundays with Subscribers. To get access to full episodes and more, become a subscriber to the show by visiting undividedpod.com. Sammy Bird, welcome to Undivided.
It's good to be with you, Brandi. Thanks for having me.
I was joking before we started that now that you're here, I can stop hearing all the whining for not having you on. You have a very diehard group of Sammy Bird fans already.
I like hearing that, and hopefully that'll grow quite a bit. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you launched really early. When did you launch?
Well, November 11th last year. So Veterans Day, we did a veteran celebration in Olympia, and at the very end of honoring our veterans, I was compelled to announce. It just felt right.
I mean, but you had planned on running for governor, right? It wasn't like the Holy Spirit took over and you decided in the moment, I'm going to run for governor.
Well, God's pretty important in my life, but it doesn't happen like that. No,
Okay.
Strategy is something that I live by. But yeah, no, we were thinking about it. I spoke with my wife, got her permission because that's my commander-in-chief.
As you should, yeah.
Did all the research going back to Gregoire, Dino Rossi, and now we see a path to victory. And so November 11th, we announced we're doing this thing.
You said strategy is very important. What's the strategy behind announcing almost 2 years early?
Thank you for that. Well, because again, one thing that I've noticed with, and I'll speak to the Republican Party in particular,
Sure.
They don't get out into the inner city. They're not engaging with various demographic groups. We're not engaging with youth, minority communities, right? The church community, like we should have been. I'm not going to make that mistake. And so in order to actually get out, knock on doors, introduce, build relationships, we needed to start early. So it is simply this strategy timeline reverse from 2024 November all the way to when we need to get out to execute our strategy with precision.
How has the media attention to your campaign been so far in your estimation?
I will say somewhat expected. Again, when I say strategy, I'm a former intelligence person. So we look at all the implications. We look at what's expected, and we plan for as much as we can. So the media has been very slow. It was interesting because one of my opponents, Raul Garcia, wonderful man, I like Raul, and he announced, and all of a sudden, whoosh, the media was there. It's like, Raul is our first Republican candidate. And I really wasn't upset about it or distraught or worried in any way because, that gives me an opportunity to operate under the radar and engaging with the people that matter. And it's not the establishment or necessarily the media. It's with the voters.
Well, a couple things. The under the radar is not a good way to run a political campaign. So I understand what you're saying. The reason we didn't have you on sooner, because we had Raul on the Sunday he announced he was on our Sundays with Subscribers. I have a general rule with candidates, and this is no offense to you. I won't do more for your campaign than you've done for your campaign. Excellent. So my rule is, especially someone like you who has no name recognition, I want to see, is he successful at raising funds? I want to see you put in a little work out on your own before I say, here's a social media platform of 250,000 people.
Oh, I love it.
It's a little bit of like, you have to earn it. And with Raul, he ran last year, so it's like, okay, he's just sort of de facto in. And in 2020, in the governor's race, I think there was 20 candidates. So it's like, I ain't having 20 candidates on. So yeah, you got to go out, you got to prove that you can build your own sort of movement. And then here you are.
I love it. And you're absolutely right. Yeah. So to that point, we had already been out since November, traveled the entire state. I mean, over the Ponderay in the northeast side of the state, all the way up to Medellin, staying overnight in Medellin, crossing over to Stevens County the next day, hitting all those small towns all the way down central Washington, western Washington, the islands, South Washington. So we've been all over the state, meeting with average everyday people like myself and engaging with them. And at the time that Raul announced, we were already $50,000 or $60,000 on the PDC, which is not the millions that we're going to need for the election. But even as we sit now, we're leading all the opponents to the, Democrat candidates combined. We've raised more money than them. Small dollar donations.
But you're saying excluding the Democrats?
Excluding the Democrats, right? So we've raised more money than all of the candidates have announced so far on the Republican side, if you total all of them. And these are small dollar donations. And so I like folks who like to look at the PDC to look and see, you'll see my average donation is $119. My friends' donations are $1,120. So the average voter, the people who will give what they can because they believe in our campaign, they believe in Washington, that's really what I want.
Do you feel, though, to a certain extent, not to harp on or dwell on your one of your opponents, we've already given him, 45 minutes on the show, so we want to make sure you get your 45 minutes to shine. But do you feel like the mainstream Republicans have already decided that's our guy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, without hesitation. And that's okay, because one of the things we find when we do intelligence analysis, these are normed behaviors. I'm a behavioral scientist, and so I see this. We have normed behaviors in terms of politics in Washington State, such as if you can get this backing or this establishment support, that is going to be the candidate that wins. Well, I believe that Lauren Culp showed that that wasn't necessarily the case. And this is not me advocating for any candidate, but simply doing my analysis, as I told you. I did Bill Bryant, I did, again, Dino, I did, Rob McKenna, and yeah.
Well, Lauren Culp lost by 500,000 votes.
Exactly. And that's it. So when you look at all the different candidates and their campaigns and how they performed in each county, that was my analysis. And so when they come up short like that specific to Lauren Culp, I can also say that Bill Bryant got 500,000 more votes in King County than Lauren did in King County when he went. I did the complete analysis. And so we stop and say, well, what was missing? What didn't happen? And that goes back to valuing all of the voices in the community, not just the political pundits, not just the people in the Republican Party, but all voters. Because if you're a governor, you represent all people.
Yeah, and I'm interested to dive into how you plan to learn from that, to strategize
Yes.
in a state where it feels impossible at this point to win as a Republican. But when I asked you, is Raul Garcia just, the mainstream's like, that's our guy, part of the reason I think they're like that is he's more moderate, and Republicans who have been more moderate in the past have performed better than a Lauren Culp, who performed very poorly in King County. And so I think the prevailing wisdom is, if you're not a moderate, you certainly don't have a chance in hell.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to change the word, not prevailing wisdom,
okay,
but prevailing thought process or prevailing mindset. And so, in fact, I have a different story, right, than even Raul or Lauren Culp. I'm the kid born in the ghetto of East Oakland, California, to a single woman with 7 children. Right, I was raised in Washington State, Seattle. So mom moved us to Seattle when I was 7. I dropped out of high school in Seattle, right? And so my story is different than any other candidate that has been put forth to run for governor in the state of Washington. Certainly on the Republican side, we're already making history. And so I think my message of unity, my message of overcoming adversity, that's a big difference from what Lauren's message was, and typically what the Republican message is. I'm an old school Republican. I'm an Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, women's rights, civil rights. That's me. And so because I've lived that life, I think my background and my life's journey makes me relatable to people who say, yeah, that's me. I struggled. I overcame adversity. And so I want that for everybody to achieve that American dream.
Yeah, and at the same time, you've described yourself as, and forgive me if I'm misquoting, but a constitutional Christian conservative.
Yeah.
Now, look, you take all those words apart, I don't think any of them are particularly bad. Constitution, love it. Christian, just fine. Conservative, I share some conservative values. But you bundle them together, and it scares the hell out of Seattle voters.
That's exactly it. No, you're right. As a matter of fact, Jace Rand said that.
Yes.
And he says, well, there goes the Seattle voters.
Right.
And I give more credit to the Seattle voters because, again, I was raised in Seattle. I used to ride my bicycle down in downtown back in the day when it was safe to do so. And so, no, I give more credit to Seattle voters to say, just as you said, to separate apart. What is conservative to me? Conservative to me is valuing parents' rights. Conservative to me is believing that you can pull yourself up from your bootstraps and succeed in America. Conservative to me is focusing education on the students and student outcomes versus the ideological interventions that many try to bring in. So that's what I mean by conservative values.
Yeah. Have you considered how you're going to combat the narrative from Democrats? I mean, I think state Democrats have been incredibly disingenuous in their political ads. I see what they did to Tiffany Smiley. And I don't know that honesty is high on the priority list when it comes to winning elections in ads. So how are you going to combat that? They're going to paint you as the next Lauren Culp.
Yeah. So truth and facts and evidence. And so the truth and facts of it, again, I'm the kid who started out life without civil rights.
Yeah.
And so you cannot take my life away.
How old are you?
I'm 62 years young. I've always wanted to say that. But no, I started off, again, without civil rights. And now I'm financially, independently just fine, right? And so that's through hard work and prayer, not helplessness and despair. And I want that for all citizens of Washington State. So when they bring their stuff, and they'll do maybe the Larry Elder thing, and the talking face of, and that's where that Christian comes in to say, well, bless your heart. Let's talk about my life on food stamps. Let's talk about my life getting food in a little brown packaging. Let's talk about getting grants from a Christian school so that we can attend, right? The kindness and graciousness of others. Let's talk about me serving in combat and re-enlisting in a combat zone so that I get tax-free money that I can invest on my own. Or getting out there at 3 o'clock in the morning to paint a room of a house that I purchased and I'm remodeling so I can sell to reinvest. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Nothing given, everything earned. That is the American dream. And I want that for everyone.
Yeah. Well, so you're Black, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I think you're Black. For you, how do I put this artfully? Do you see that as a qualification for the job?
No and yes. So, and that's a terrible answer, and I get this.
Well, it's kind of it's an unartful question.
Right. No, so
that's where you are.
We'll work it out.
Okay.
I told someone the other day, I said, I was born Black, I was raised Black, and I'll die Black, and that's God's gift to me, right? I mean, that's just God makes us how God makes us, and I'm good with it. It's never been anything negative for me, even during the times of racism, right? The 60s, goodness gracious, right?
During times of racism, being Black wasn't a negative for you?
Right? No. Well, because my mom raised me to have resiliency, right? She raised me to understand my self-worth, to have self-esteem, to have self-respect. Again, resiliency, so that I could actually navigate the adversities, right? Or barriers that life will throw at you, or as people will sometimes call systems today. And I have a whole discussion on that. But no, it gives me a context of understanding what it is like. That is unique, right? If you haven't lived it, you haven't lived it. Yeah. So it's a little difficult understanding if you haven't lived it. I have lived it. And so I'm not the person who would ever say racism doesn't exist or that prejudice doesn't exist, because it happens every day, not necessarily to me, but different to different people. And I value that. I mean, I value that for them. But what I'm here to do is bring solutions, right? To remove those barriers, to look for opportunities and ways to elevate all citizens of Washington State, especially those who are disparately impacted or those who have been deemed marginalized. We need to reform our welfare system, right? We have to stop just giving people enough money to keep them poor for the rest of their life, or that becomes generational poverty. We can do better. We will do better. I'll do better. And so I think my race doesn't qualify me by no means. I think it's also representative of the greatness of America. Back to those conservative values that anyone can make it in America if you're willing to work hard, even with barriers that may be there. I'm not going to deny it.
I love it. Well, you mentioned Larry Elder, and that's the first thing I thought is, have you been called an Uncle Tom yet?
Yes, okay. In different words.
Okay, good.
And again, I look at that, and you have to consider. So again, with behavioral scientists, you have to consider who the messenger is, right? And will that get to me? Well, yeah, I'm a little bit of a drama queen. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm a mama's boy, right? But at the same time, I understand who the messengers are of that kind of vernacular. And I don't take it personal because, again, that's self-worth. Right. Understanding the message, understanding my heart, what I hope to bring to the office of the governor. Once people see us in action after our coronation, oh my goodness, we're going to bring so many more people into the fold, because we are going to give value back to the citizens of Washington State, all of the citizens of Washington State.
Kings get coronated. You're not running to be a king. We're going to strike the word coronation.
What is the term? That's not the coronation, but what is the term?
Sworn in.
Yeah, that's sworn in.
What is
inauguration? That's what it is. Thank you for that.
Kings get coronated.
Strike the coronation. Then I do not want to be a king. I think we have one of those. But anyway.
Yeah, that's true. King Inslee. On the front though about race, it is a fascinating place we've come to where lived experience, the Black experience matters, except if you're conservative. Yeah. And then it's like, well, no, not his Black experience.
Yes. Oh, it's like diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
You know, that phrase, and I'm going to be doing a speech, I think it's tomorrow, on weaponization of labels, language, and we'll talk about psychological operations. Something I know a lot about. And you're right. As soon as you have an independent thought, your diverse thought, your diversity is no longer wanted. You will no longer be included, and equity to give you voice, it no longer exists. And so it's the highest level of hypocrisy when you say you advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but as soon as someone has a different professional opinion, you really go after them. You label them, right? You attack them. The Uncle Tom, and someone said the other day, how dare you use Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quotes in your speeches? And it's like, must I say again, I am the Black man born without civil rights, and it was Martin Luther King Jr. who was responsible for me getting civil rights, right? Yeah. And so, no, I think that I will take my childhood idols' words, because they mean something to me today more so than they ever meant before. I think we need to stop, reset, and bring MLK back into the picture, because what he did, he was a patriot. You know, he was conservative. He was constitutional, and he was a Christian. Right? I mean, no, I challenge anyone to deny me on that.
Like I said, the words on their own.
They're on their own. And that's
fine.
what he did. He marched with his Christian values. He preached love and togetherness and unity. Everything that I'm saying, he believed in the Declaration and the Constitution. He referred to them as magnificent documents, promissory notes to the American people, all of the American people, which is why I capitalize all at my phrases, governor for all of Washington, because we must not leave anyone out. We've forgotten a lot of people. I won't make that mistake.
Yeah. I want to talk about your military service.
Yes.
Can you? It was Memorial Day this past week, and so certainly there's a lot of folks who have served or have loved ones who've served who watch the show. So give me a little cliff notes on what you've done for this country.
Well, I dropped out of high school after finishing my junior year, and I joined the Marine Corps because they had the best looking uniforms. Not a lot of due diligence there, but I served 2 enlistments and a half. I extended, received my honorable discharge, my good conduct medal, expeditionary medal, sea service deployment. And I got my high school diploma because it was a promise to my mother. And then I went to college, got my bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, 4.0, graduate degree from Villanova University. And I'm finishing up my PhD in organizational psychology. But 16 years later, after leaving the Marine Corps, I volunteered after 9/11 to join Special Forces. I became a Special Forces Green Beret in the Army post 9/11.
Was it the National Guard or is it the
I started out
Army
with that.
National
Yes,
Guard?
I started out in the National Guard, then went into active duty.
Oh, okay.
And then ended with the Washington State National Guard, which I'm very proud of. But no, I served total 24 years service to my country. Received the Bronze Star of Valor, Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal, numerous commendations. And so I believe I had a very successful military career. But when it comes to Memorial Day, I lost my best friend in combat. My team was hit on an objective, and it's emotional for me. I'm a mama's boy, but for whatever reason, I didn't cry as much at my mother's funeral as I did just in the wake that we had for Dan in a palace in Baghdad, because I couldn't leave. I was supposed to escort his body back to his wife and his little baby, and I couldn't because of my mission and the role that I was playing at the time. But it touches me. And here's the relevance for your listeners. No matter how rough things get, no matter how disenfranchised you are with our election system or the state of the state, never give up hope, and always remember those who fought for, bled for, and died for our right to vote, died for our rights to make America America. And I tell people this, there is no America without the American veteran. Yeah. And I pray that people realize that. And I also pray this, as we talk about those who have given all, can we not get back to, human decency? Can we not put people over politics? Let's do right by one another. Let's love one another, and let's stop this pettiness. We can agree and disagree, but can I not love you? And my answer is I will. You can be as on the other side as you want to. I will love you as my brother and my sister. By the way, most of my family is Democrats. And so I will never say a harsh word about a Democrat, because what value is that? They believe in what they believe in, but we can still work together and we can still love each other.
Yeah, on the military service front, and this sort of thing is top of mind for me because of Lion Clyde Shavers, who's serving down in Olympia after lying about his military service. There are 2 things that have come up about your military service that I want to hash out with you.
Please.
One is the court martial.
Yes.
So way back in the day, this is the early 80s, right? So we're not talking recent, early 80s. You were court-martialed, correct?
I asked for it.
You asked for it. So
yes.
Before we even get into that, there have been some articles that say that you claimed it was your cousin who got court-martialed. Yeah. Why did you do that?
So here's what I would say.
Your cousin with the same name.
Yeah, so I did. I did not know what this person... This is a lady who's, again, far on the other side. Mm-hmm. Those people who would say, how dare you use MLK's phrases, who was talking about something. I didn't know what she was talking about, right? And so I was taken aback, first and foremost. There was no intention to lie or anything else. I did not know where she was coming from. So I'm like, well, that couldn't be me. As it turns out, she was talking about something 40 years in the past. But I don't walk away from that. I lean into it. So for everyone listening, to be very clear, I was the subject of a racial attack. A person who thought it was okay to use the N-word and to make the black jokes. And I took it because he outranked me. But as soon as you put hands on me, I took action. That was the final straw for me. And I did. So I hit a sergeant. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, I had every right to request trial by court, and that's what that was. I wasn't referred to. I requested it. Why? Because when I spoke to my commander, it's like, you did wrong. And I said, well, sir, he was doing this. He says, that does not matter. As soon as he said that, my whole mindset changed. My attitude changed. I would have been better off taking Article 15. We already know. You don't court-martial soldiers, sailors, airmen, or guardsmen for fighting, right? It's Article 15 at worst, or you talk it through. This was something altogether different. And so here's what happened. I took my punishment. I was reduced in rank. I chipped paint off of Navy ships for 28 days. I went back to my unit. I was promoted again. I received my honorable discharge. And 16 years later, here I am, top secret, SCI clearance. I'm a Fed. I served as a federal officer with the United States Department of Energy, right? With a Q SCI clearance. And so I don't walk away or hide from that. I stand true and said, I stood up for myself. And I'm not ashamed of standing up for myself. So when people want to bring those disparities forward, I'm glad you brought it up because I don't want secrets. If I got a skeleton in the closet, bring it out. I'll dance with it.
Well, and let me be clear. I really don't care much about a court-martial of that nature from more than 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I was concerned with the headlines that when you were confronted about it, you lied and said, that's my cousin who has the same name.
And so again, consider the source of that headline. And that headline came from a blogger. So this is the League of Women Voters. This was the person who supported and contributed to my opponent's campaign when I was running for school board. This is the person who says very nasty things about conservatives.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that is unheard of or that is shocking or surprising. However they spin it, let them spin it. I'm not going to give in to that. I'm going to stand up for what I did. I'm going to stand up for who I am. And I've given enough for my country. I've spent my entire life in service to my nation. So if someone wants to sit back on the cheap seats and vilify, disparage, do your best. But I will lean forward and take full ownership and accountability of who I am and how I've contributed to this nation.
Yeah, and the other article that came up, and I don't really know the extent to which the Tri-Cities Observer is a
blog.
Is a reliable news source. But there was also this accusation that you were confronted and asked for your full military record, and you refused to provide it.
Not true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not true at all.
Have you put it out there just to because there are people who lie about their service to get into public office? Have you just thought about just posting it on your
send
campaign
it to you.
site? I'd love it.
No, I'll get it to you as soon as we're done. I actually have it on my phone. I'm sure through email because I have sent it out to anybody who requests it. I'll send it out to them. Now, if you're like this other person, would I give it to her? No, I would not. But I'll give it to a neutral, fair, which you are. I believe that to be true. You're unbiased. You call it as you say. That's one of the reasons why I'm a listener, right? So no, I have nothing to hide. And again, if you stolen valor, if you're saying you have a Bronze Star, right, valor, Purple Heart, Meritorious Service Medal, again, you deserve to be vilified if you're lying about that. So no, I'm not going to lie about my military service. I'm honored and proud of my military service. And in fact, I retired out of the Washington State Army National Guard. I'm proud of that. My brothers and sisters who are there and still serve. So no, you shall have it as soon as I get back to my hotel.
Good. I love it. Just due diligence.
Yeah.
The school board.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time for education. And I don't know, would you say it's your experience in education issues in the school board that really prompted the run for governor?
It was part of it. I mean, it was certainly part of it because once you go in, so I had been asked to run for Congress, Senate. A black conservative is not the typical in Eastern Washington, even though I'm raised in Western Washington. But I said no. I had no interest, right? God kept me alive to take care of my family, my wife, and my babies, and so which are all grown women right now. But I did run for school board because he shut down the state. He shut down our places of worship, and he shut down our schools. And my daughter was in school in 7th grade when school shut down. It was part of it because what I saw after I ran, and I will tell you, this blogger, right? And those of her, I will say ilk, not to make it negative, but those like her, just seeing all the nasty things that they say and the lies that they say. And then also that they propose to support children and children's education. And then when I saw what was happening in our school system, I said, no, I got to stand up. And as you know, I'm being recalled for standing up for students' lives. And I want people to know that too. So as they Google any other blogs that you'll see from the far left, and again, bless their hearts, I have no ill will towards them, except that I will bring truth. When students were dying at the highest suicide rate, when we knew mental health was a huge issue, lost learning, right? And the facts that masks did not stop the transmission of COVID, I think this is now, all sciences will validate that. Why would I not act to give equitable respect to the families who weren't heard, those children who were suffering, those children who were dying? And I said right there at the school board meeting, which is recorded, I will not wait 3 more months, 3 more days, or 3 more hours for another child to take their life because of this illegal masking of our children. And I took action. I did it within the law, unlike what the bloggers would say. I only talked to one other school board member. That became evident because now the Superior Court found that was true, but no one talks about that. We didn't nefariously come together like they accused me of. I only talked to one, which was within my rights under OPMA. So, yeah, there was a lot. The state being pushed to the precipice. I mean, when you sit back and you see tax after tax after tax, and then you know that we're bringing in record revenues. You know that this administration, this governor, has doubled spending since taking office. And when you make up a tax, an income tax, which goes against the Washington State Constitution, you call it an excise tax. The IRS says it's an income tax, and your Supreme Court goes with what you say. I'm going to go with the Constitution first and foremost. I'm going to go with the IRS. It's an income tax, and it's illegal. But yet it passed. So are we going to stand up to this or not?
Yeah, and people would say, well, what can you do if the court, you could have vetoed it, which I'm assuming you would have vetoed it. But, when it comes to what can you do as governor, especially if you're working against or you're trying to work with a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, a state Supreme Court that some would argue has become a little ideological. And when it comes to education, an independently elected superintendent of public instruction. On education, for instance, what do you think you could have done as governor to ease the ease the challenges that kids were facing during the pandemic?
Yeah, so specific to that, Chris Reichdahl went to the governor and got the governor's approval, got the governor's support to go after school districts, to go after school boards. And what they said was this: they didn't threaten recall. They threatened the funding of students. And once you looked at the facts around this, they cannot take away funds from a school. It's illegal if they're following their own laws, right? And so that threat was to delay funding. And so what could I do as a governor? Well, not support that and not delay funding when we are struggling to educate our kids. Right now, academia, when you average out all the scores, all the results, only 50.7% of all students in Washington State were able to meet grade level standards in English and language arts. Only 37.7% of all students have met grade level standards in math, and only 42.7% made grade level standards in science. And so as governor, I would not have supported that. The other thing is the governor has the right to appoint 7 out of the 14 Board of Education commissioners. I would make sure that I appoint Board of Education commissioners who will support me in focusing on academic outcomes, not any social engineering, indoctrination of students. And I know those are powerful words, but there's a reality.
We just talked about it on the Sunday show last week.
There you have it. And so knowing that, knowing the scores, knowing how we are failing our students, why would we not move forward to hold school districts accountable for academic outcomes? That's what we're missing. We're missing leadership and we're missing accountability. Further, any law that would not fund special education, I would not support, because we need to fully fund special education. Those are more forgotten stakeholders, those beautiful babies who have special needs. We need to support them. So I'm for school choice. I'm for leveling out the playing field. I'm for that money follows the backpack. But yet the governor's hands or the government's hands will not get into the academics of homeschooling. We're not going to have strings attached. So those moms and those dads will have the right to educate their kids as, again, in accordance with the laws that we currently have. I'm for having marginalized communities, those impoverished communities, have equal access to quality education for their kids. Because when he shut down the schools, how many poor folks could afford to send their kid to a private school that was still open, that was giving in-person educations? And so when you think about disparate impacts, I often find it interesting that the groups that profess to advocate so much for the marginalized communities do so little for them, and in fact, bring forth policies that cause more harm to those communities.
Yeah, I think that leads into public safety, which I also want to address with you, because we've seen some of the worst public safety impacts from these laws they've pushed in communities that have higher rates of people of color living there. And, the police pursuit bill, for instance, when you have a Democratic Party in Olympia, and I'd be careful not to, I'm always careful not to lump them all in together, because I do think it's a pretty small faction that has a lot of power, that is more progressive, what I would call pro-criminal, and they just seem to have this hold over the whole party. How do you work with, if you're governor, a Democratic Party that has taken some of these really extreme steps that have eroded public safety?
Yeah, here's something that's going to be unique. I'm going to bring forward the People's TV. It'll be a television station. It'll be a state station.
You mean like Chinese state media?
Oh, no. Well, you know what? Not controlled necessarily in terms of indoctrinating as the CCP would, because again, we can talk about China, and that's my area of expertise, by the way, as well. We can talk about that. But no, transparency. So a little bit different, not to indoctrinate, but to lay it out there. So when our politicians, our senators, and our representatives want to bring forth a bill like 5599, right, to separate children from their parents, and we can talk about that as well, I want everybody to understand what the implications of that bill is, right? So that the people who say that they're represented, that they actually know what their representatives are doing, because I don't believe that is the case.
Like TVW? Well, who gets to decide on, what did you call it, state TV?
No, people. So it's People's Television, right?
Who gets to decide how to lay out 5599 for the public?
No, it would be fact. It's fact-based. So imagine this, when we televise the debate over 5599, so that more of our citizens have access to actually seeing both sides. I don't think that's a negative thing, because is debate not healthy, right? Socratic method of dialectic engagement, so that they can see, well, this side is saying this side is saying this. The whole idea, Brandi, is for the average person who works 9 to 5 or 03 to whenever, right? 2 o'clock in the afternoon, trying to make a living, they have readily access on their television so that they can get the facts, objective, both sides. And even if you waited till the very end and we just lay out specifically just the facts of the matter so people could see what it entails, I think people would not support that, the majority. So I just want to make sure that our citizens have full access so that they understand all the implications, all the intricacies of legislation that's being pushed through. And as governor, because you asked, would I work with them? Of course I would. I mean, that's the whole idea, is that, we talk about that dual federalism, right? That layer cake government structure, which I believe in, that we have accountability. And so if they're bringing forth this kind of bill, I would not support it. I would veto it. But I would still talk to them. I would let them know what my concerns are. I am all for supporting our students, supporting their health, supporting their welfare to make sure they're not abused. But at the same time, no, there's lines we can't cross, like separating children from their parents. So I would say no to that. Then I would say, now let's talk about how we can fix it. I'm not sure there's a fix to 5599.
Yeah.
It is that bad. Even taking away our Second Amendment rights, Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution, right? We have more protections in terms of the right to bear arms and to protect ourselves, our families, and our property. But this administration keeps stepping over our Constitution, stepping over our national Constitution, which is Section 2 of Article 1. So no, it's the power of the veto, but it's also the party of negotiation, the concept of mediation. I want to bring that forward.
Yeah. Check back with me if you're elected on the People's TV.
Yeah.
I don't think I like it.
Okay,
because I'm thinking about if Jay Inslee came to me or Bob Ferguson and said, I'm going to create a news channel where we're going to tell the truth, I'd be like, bullshit, you're going to tell me the truth.
Yeah, no, I got you.
So I'm not sure I trust anyone.
But it would just be, so it's like open debate. I mean, sure. I don't think anybody would go against open debate, because you get to see both sides. And that's really what I'm proposing. So name a side, we'll call it constitutional TV, we can call it whatever we want to. I just want people to see what's happening. I don't like when we do deals behind the backs. Article 1, Section 1. Right? Power is inherent in the people, and government derives its just powers by the consent of the governed. And it's government's job to protect and maintain the individual rights of the citizens. I take that to heart, right? If I was ever get a tattoo, maybe that would be it. It's that important, right? And so why would we not be more transparent with the citizens that we serve? And as governor, That is my intent, to bring forth that kind of governance that says we put the people first. That is who we work for. That is who we serve. This is called servant leadership. And I think we need that in government.
Yeah. So you mentioned China, your expertise there. We're going to have you back on. We'll dive into some of those things, but I really want this to be sort of an introduction to you on the big ticket items for folks. I still worry about, and I don't say worry like I'm endorsing you or anything, but for I've been clear. I don't want Bob Ferguson to be governor, right? And that's just, to me, that is a fourth term of Jay Inslee, and I think our state needs a little freaking break. So I'm looking at, okay, can anybody beat him? Your name recognition is still way too low.
Yeah.
How do you improve that in a meaningful way on this side of the Cascade?
Oh, 100%. I'm here all week this week. I think I was here all week last week. And then on the weekends, I went to Stevens County and spoke at a dinner, right? And then Clark County. And so I'm traveling all over the state. So while some people are rubbing elbows with the establishment, right?
Who's some people?
Well, others. I don't want to label or call people out or gaslight, as you say.
Interesting.
But I will say this. I am not the establishment candidate. And I would say the people's candidate, but I want that to have a negative implication. I'm here to represent all citizens of Washington State, and I'm going out in the streets. There's no substitute for knocking on a door. There's no substitute for going down Rainier, right, or going to Capitol Hill, or going into Hilltop. There's no substitute for knocking on those doors and introducing yourself to those people, or to go to a parade, or I was at a car show yesterday in Snohomish County. So to answer your question, I'm putting so much effort into getting out and meeting everyday citizens, because that's who I want to serve. And it's not that I have a problem with the elitist or rich people or the political hierarchy or establishment. I don't. I would like all of their support. I would love them just like I love everybody else. But again, I serve the people. And I don't like it when there's a group of people that think they know better than the people who actually send those ballots in. I think they need to hear from me directly. Name recognition is huge. I'm from Western Washington. We have been building a relationship in Western Washington again since November. We're just operating, I would say, under the radar. I know what you said about operating under the radar, but think about it. We're going to real voters. We're not necessarily bringing a TV camera, and we're not going to expect King 5. I'm sure they're a wonderful station to be with us, right? With their cameras, right, or anybody else, right? And so when I was on Fox News, Fox and Friends, again, that may not be the desired news outlet anymore, but it was refreshing and it was appreciated. But again, I want to give it to the people. So name recognition means that we are spending the time that we need in Western Washington. I did do my due diligence. I do understand Snohomish, Pierce, and King County. That's where we need to make the move. And again, let's look at what I represent in all the totality of Semi Bird for governor of Washington State. I bring a lot. We talked about race, and we talked about being relatable. We talked about my background. I think my background makes me relatable, not necessarily because of the color of my skin, because poverty is not racist, right? We have a lot of white people who were born poor, raised poor, and found their way. Some of them are still poor. Yeah. So I don't like that separation by race, but does it matter? Does it play a role? It will to some, right? When they say we want representation, I think we're already making history for Washington State. That's something we can all be proud of. So I think when it comes to beating Bob Ferguson, with respect to Bob, I'm not fighting Bob. I'm fighting for everyone in Washington State. And that's the difference. When you're not fighting against someone, you're fighting for everyone. That's what we want from our elected officials. And that's what I'm bringing to the table.
Well, I will say you have a good level of energy. This is the first time we've met. You have a very infectious personality, which I think is good on the campaign trail. You can't knock on the doors of 2.5 million voters, though. So you are going to have to, get out there in some big ways with earned media and all of that stuff, and that can be challenging for Republican candidates.
It can, and so that's where strategy comes in. Yeah. And so strategy, your sign placement, bridge flag waving, all these different events that you can go to. Media will find their way, and again, it's not that I have faith; it's just statistical fact. Again, I'm a geek when it comes to looking at all the past campaigns. The media will be there because the public will push the media to be there because they're going to say, where are you?
You mean they're going to harass me on Twitter? Like, why won't you send me
we're going to be nice to Brandi Kruse because she is wonderful and we like Brandi. But no, I mean, as we gain popularity, and that is going to happen, there are places where people will say, Who? To the other folks who are running, they won't know. And so it's to be expected, but that's not going to slow us down or stop us. Now, in terms of budget, right? In terms of budget, so that we can get those commercials. We had an opportunity when CNN interviewed President Trump. There we were, right? We had our commercial playing, took advantage of an opportunity that was a strategic ad campaign. There's going to be more. There's going to be radio. There's going to be a combination. This is what we call in special operations asymmetrical. Right? So we're coming at it all directions, and that eases the fact that we don't have the millions of dollars that Bob was able to transfer, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll leave it at that because I don't think that was right.
Because you brought up Trump,
yes.
I don't like Trump. I just don't like him. And as an independent voter, I will say he turns me off. When there's a candidate who's like gung-ho for Trump, I'm like, I don't know about that. But he's also statistically a death knell for Republican down ballot candidates. Are you fearful of that? First of all, do you support the former president? Are you a Trump fan?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a Trump fan. What I would say is this. I voted for President Trump, and I'll be very honest about that. When you compare...
Twice?
Yeah.
Did you vote for him twice?
No. The first time I did a write-in.
Who'd you write in?
Marco Rubio.
You can be forgiven for that.
No, but I wouldn't do that again because I realized after that was a wasted vote. Sure. Right. And I certainly was not going to, with respect to the other side, I wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. And the reason I didn't was because I wasn't a fan of President Trump's communication styles. Yeah. And that's being respectful to now our 45th. And so, but the second time, his policies, right? Energy independence, secure our border, elevating Black and brown people academically and in terms of economic prosperity. We had some of the best numbers, right? Some of the lowest levels of unemployment among what we would call Black and brown communities and women for that matter. So I supported that. That being said, someone asked me straight up, what is your relationship with President Trump? And I said, look, I know how divisive President Trump is. And I know that my role as a leader in Washington state is to unite our citizens, not to divide. So I'm not going to take any presidential endorsement. I will not take any presidential endorsement. And that's not because I don't support or like or even respect. I mean, I respect anybody who served our country as president. And I would even say that for folks on the other side because they put themselves out there and they were elected. But in Washington state, we cannot allow people to weaponize other politicians.
They will, though.
And they will.
That is what it is.
And that's okay, though, because my focus is going to be on our constituents, on our citizens. I just don't want to give them something else that they can use to clutter the waters.
Yeah. Would you prefer, though, for the viability of your own candidacy that he is not atop the ticket and another Republican is?
No, I'm a constitutionalist. So I'm going to let the people decide through the primary process. And whatever the people decide, then that's what it is. I don't want to compromise any campaigns. Not that I have all that juice as a gubernatorial candidate. I will tell you this will change when we approach the primaries coming up because I do believe we will win the primary. I believe we will be the final two, probably Bob Ferguson and myself. But no, I support the people's process. I mean, when I say that again, the Constitution, and not to taint the waters, not to prejudge, and not to put myself in a position where I allow presidents to be weaponized against the campaign when my focus is one Washington, right? A united Washington. That's what I want. I'm not going to let anything get in its way. And here's what I would also say, Brandi, for all your listeners. We need to stop attacking one another, right? The division, it's reckless. It does no good. And if you want to save Washington state, we need to rally together. And that's all people who want common sense governance, right? You want low taxes. You want a tax break. We haven't had one in 40 years. I got you. You want to deal with the homeless crisis? I got you. You want fiscal responsibility? I got you. Safe streets for your children to play in better schools to educate your kids? I've got you. Let's talk about that because that crosses all domains of politics, not just Republican, Democrat, or Independent.
And that has been a commercial for Undivided. It's very in line with the mission of the show. Nailed it. Let's end with this. Because you brought up the primary, there is a chance if there's too many Republican candidates, like there was in 2020, there was a million, that we could have a top two Democratic finish. Because that's our system, right? Our system doesn't allow for one Democrat, one Republican. Yeah. I have been told that the state Republican Party is toying with the idea of having some sort of nominating process to thin the herd ahead of the primary to avoid a scenario where you have a Bob Ferguson, Hillary Franz general election. Yeah. If the state Republican Party does that, and they come to you and say, it's not you, Semi-Bird. It's not you. It's Raul Garcia. Are you willing to back down, end your campaign pre-primary?
I would say if it's clear that we're not winning, then it's the right thing to do to support the candidate that's winning. I think that's the right thing to do, and that's not hard for me. Dr. King would say it's always the right time to do the right thing. I'm doubtful in terms of party politics and establishment party politics. I don't give a lot of credence to that. But to answer your question directly, yes, I would. But here's something else to consider. We're not going to have a top two, both Democrats, because, again, I would just say, my opponent on the Republican side, I don't even see him as an opponent. I think he's a wonderful man. I like him. He, as you said, he is very moderate. Maybe we can underline very. I will stand on my own as a conservative, right? I'm not going to compromise my values or beliefs to get elected because I don't have to. I just have to message what my values or beliefs are so that people understand it is better governance that will give them more prosperity and better education and safer streets. So I just need to do my job. So I will be the Republican nominee for the office of governor. And I believe that Hillary Franz and Mr. Mullet, if he gets in, Senator Mullet, and then Raul, I think they're so closely clumped in the middle. Again, I'm an analyst. They're so closely clumped in the middle that they're going to be sharing those votes. But the Democrats in mass will vote for Bob, most likely, because, again, he's been normed in terms of the administration of Jay Inslee. Whereas for me, I stand alone as the conservative of choice, the fiscal conservative, the conservative who will unite our state, and the conservative who will not compromise his values, his beliefs, or his morals to get elected. I won't do that. But I will communicate to everybody who I am and what I'm about.
All right, Semi-Bird, well, we'll leave it there. We will have you back on. So call off the Twitterati. We'll have it
down,
back
everybody.
on.
Stand
just
down.
like
We love Brandi.
We have invited every gubernatorial candidate. We'll see which ones come on, but this has been a great conversation. It's nice to finally meet you, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much, Brandi.